Let's welcome to the show, Perry Saturn. Perry, big thrill to have you on, sir. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. When I first think of Perry Saturn, the first thing I think of is ECW and the Eliminators. What an innovative tag team you guys were. How'd you even end up in ECW?
Well, we were in, John and I went to Memphis to work for Lawler back in the territory days, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And that was the first place John and I worked together. I managed a bar in Boston, a rock and roll club called the Rock Pile, and John was one of my bouncers. And we got friendly, you know, and I was supposed to go to Memphis, you know, that's the Lawler territory. Me and Hunter were supposed to go there together. And like a week before we were supposed to leave, Hunter got the job at WCW.
Oh,
so then a little bit later on, a couple of months, I had John come with me because it's better to go down there as a tag team so you can split the expenses and shit, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And then, I don't know, have you ever met Wally Yamaguchi?
I know the name.
He was up in the New England area and stuff. And well, anyways, he was booked an American Talent for Japan. And when me and John finished up with, we stayed in Memphis for 11 months, and we were getting ready to go back to Boston. And yeah, Wally called me, and me and John got booked for Tenru over in Japan for war. And we worked there for a year and a half or so every other month. And we wanted to get work in the States, you know, or Puerto Rico, and we sent a tape to Puerto Rico, and I sent a tape to Paulie. And Puerto Rico didn't work out. They did some stuff with your pay that I wouldn't agree to. And Taz watched the tape of me and John, and he convinced Paulie to bring us in. And originally, Paulie brought us in to put the Steiners over. He was only going to bring us in 1 or 2 matches. And, but he was impressed with us, and we ended up getting a good gig there, you know?
I figured you and John were custom made for the WWF back then. Did you send any feelers out to them?
I had 2 tryouts there. They weren't interested.
As a team?
1 tryout as a team. I had 2, I think, singles before that. We tried out in WCW, too. And Flair was the booker, and he was a bit of a dickhead to us. They weren't interested either, and he was a dickhead, you know, like just because Jimmy Hart brought us in for the tryout, and it was the big battle between Hogan and Flair, you know, all that
right.
heat. So we were on Hogan's guys, even though we didn't know Hogan. And a friend of ours knew Jimmy Hart, and that's how we got the tryout there. And after our match, Flair asked me, he goes, "Hey, you guys got any amateur background?" And I told him, I go, "No, we both got extensive martial art backgrounds because we're both black belts." And he was, "Oh, good, I'll book you with the Steiners because they love beating up karate guys." So I knew they weren't fucking hiring us.
Right.
You know, and that's all, you know, and then shortly, weeks after that, we started with ECW.
Got it. What was your first impression of Paul Heyman?
Loved Paulie. He called me, our first time I talked to him, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm a night person, so I'm always up, you know, and he wanted to change our names, and I wouldn't agree to that, well, you know, and he really liked this gimmick he wanted to call us, but like to this day, I've only wrestled under 1 name, so I still get royalty checks. I own all my intellectual properties. If the company gives you a name, then they own it.
Got it.
And even though ECW didn't have give out royalty checks at the time, I still didn't want to change my name and set that precedence where they want me to change everywhere, you know.
Do you remember what he wanted to call you?
Yeah, well, he said some S&M gimmick. I don't remember the State-O-Masochist thing. He was going to have a couple of girls whipping us. And the ECW fans would have loved it. But I told him, I thanked him and told him that we're going to keep our name, and he could use us if he comes up with anything for the Eliminators, then we'd love to work there. And then like a week later, Taz called me and said, "Hey, can you guys come in this Friday?" I said, "Yeah, man, no problem."
How'd you get along with the locker room at first?
Everybody's cool. ECW is the best place I ever worked. and it was just awesome. Paulie's the best boss I ever had. Paulie had some really like Paulie's fucking habitual liar. He'll lie to you about shit he doesn't have to. Never lie to you about anything that's gonna fuck you over, like money or anything, but just bullshit stuff, and you completely overlook it because everything else is so good on you. And it was working there was awesome. Me and John were fighting when I left. Otherwise, I'd have never left. Because it was just awesome working there, and Paulie helped. Paulie did a lot of good stuff for us, you know.
Yeah. Any advice Paul gave you that stuck with you throughout your career, or anything you can remember?
One thing I remember, we were really good, we're very friendly with the pit bulls. And one night after one of the shows, sitting around, Anthony Pitbull 2 and I were talking, and shit-faced, you know, and he goes, you know, Paulie used us to get you guys over. And it bugged me a little bit because we were friends, you know. So I asked Paulie about it. I go, you know, Paulie, Anthony told me that he was feeling bad. He said, you used them to get us over. And he goes, fuck that. He goes, I paid them to get you over. And so anytime I had any doubts about something, about it being a job, it's a job. And they got paid to do it, you know.
That's great. Yeah, you're right.
And that's the one thing that I never forgot. But Paulie was awesome. Like, we couldn't do promos worth of shit. And Paul, after the ECW arena, every 3 weeks, we'd do promos for TV. And he'd do everybody's promos. He would impersonate each person, sound just like them, and to help you figure out. Yeah, Paulie was awesome with that.
Why'd you leave ECW? You said you're fighting with your partner?
John and I were fist fighting each other. We couldn't get along anymore.
Wow.
We were both drug addicts on different drugs, and that doesn't mix.
Right.
And I told Paulie I didn't want to tag with John anymore. And Paulie told me that he spent too much money and time getting us over as a team, and he couldn't split us up. And we got into a big argument over it. And Paulie, I think, because I yelled at him from the voice, so Paulie yelled back at me and said, well, if you want to leave, fucking leave. We didn't have contracts. We just had a handshake. And by now, Raven and I were friends, and he's getting ready to start with WCW. So I asked him, you know, and he goes, yeah, I'll get you in right away. So that's why I left. And otherwise, I wouldn't have, because I loved being at ECW. And looking back at it, it was the best time of my career. Paulie was great at making you feel pride in what you're doing, you know, and if you're proud, it makes it so much better, you know.
He has the personality that you want to be around, the guy. I remember Tommy Dreamer introduced me to him, and I'm a nobody. He goes, I know exactly who you are. And he starts building me up when I just met him for the first time, and I'm like, wow, this guy's good. This guy's good.
He probably does know, but he watches doesn't miss anything, you know, and
yeah.
He was horrible at managing the business, the dollars and cents of it. But the other part of the business, the creative, he's the best. I don't know. Vince is pretty good too. Vince is definitely the hardest worker, but Paulie's probably the best when it comes to creative. And like I said, he helped everybody on the roster, you know. When you would do your promos, he would do the impression of you, sound just like you, so you could see how to do the promo and shit. Right. And he'd do everybody, you know.
Right.